Dear friends, I'm a little behind my own schedule, but I can explain, of course. After all, I'm a lawyer. I can explain anything. But seriously, here's my explanation. In Germany, pretrial detention, which should, according to EU and UN law, be the exception to the rule that people who are presumed innocent until found guilty and should therefore remain free to defend themselves, this exception in Germany is the rule. This is so for two reasons. One, pretrial detention and the entire prison system is a business. The more prison cells are occupied, the more money the prison makes. Reason number two is to deprive detainees of their ability to defend themselves. This is especially true when it comes to pretrial detention for attorneys, and it is more than obvious in my case. Because as an attorney, you need to be able to have access to your files, to your computer, and to the internet. In my case, we not only have to deal with the issues that I have already spoken about, including white torture, but also, as you'll hear in my next statement, statement number 4, we're dealing with kidnapping, which is a very grave violation of international law. It probably qualifies as state terrorism. And that is exactly, or especially rather, bad if this crime of kidnapping is committed for political reasons, as it was clearly in my case. Now, there is an excellent law review article on what constitutes extrajudicial kidnapping, or kidnapping per se, and on what the consequences, the legal consequences of such a crime should be. This area of the law is one which very few legal scholars have dealt with and which the judiciary tries to pretend it doesn't exist. But it does, as my case shows in much more detail than other cases. And it just so happens that there is a highly acclaimed legal scholar who has written about what constitutes an extrajudicial kidnapping and what the consequences of such a kidnapping should be. And here's the problem. Because of pretrial detention, I knew that he had written an excellent article on this subject, but I could not get a hold of that article because of pretrial detention, until finally I turned to one of our friends, a young law student from Vienna, who immediately sent it to me. Now I have it, and now I can not only use it to get out of here immediately, but I will also use it to then go after those who are responsible, or have poetic justice take care of them and their crimes, as my much more gentle wife reminded me. And that leads me directly to some kind of a conundrum. Tomorrow, or maybe the day after tomorrow, you'll hear my statement number 3, I think, which deals with the white torture, and then you'll hear statement number 4, which deals with the kidnapping. And you will, I'm sure, ask, how could this have happened? You will also, I'm sure, understand that I am at times very angry and ready to strike very, very hard at those who I know for a fact are responsible. And believe me, I do have the means to strike very, very hard at them, even now. But thanks to my wife and thanks to some friends, I decided not to make use of these means, but to simply do what I am probably meant to do and what I was designed for, and that is expose the crimes and the criminals who are responsible, shine a bright light on both the crimes and the criminals, and leave the rest to the boomerangs of justice, which, according to the law of poetic justice, will unfailingly find their targets. Let me explain this in a little more detail. I do not believe in turning the other cheek, because if everybody turns the other cheek to injustice, then everybody will ultimately lose their heads, and not just figuratively speaking. Remember that we're dealing not with people who innocently lost their way and made a couple of mistakes. No. Anyone who goes out and kills children who are standing in line for food by putting a bullet in their head And anyone who forces old people in nursing homes to first take the shots and then die alone, completely isolated from their loved ones, is a monster without any human qualities whatsoever. And don't tell me that this will be taken care of in another life or reincarnation. Because if this were true, then we would have to resign ourselves to now be living in a completely lawless society and to hope for the best in some very distant future. And I refuse to do this. This is not what I was designed for. Remember, if you are a religious person and believe in what organized religion tells you, there is this one sentence that tells you to not just stand there and do nothing. And that is, God helps those who help themselves. So here's my way out of this conundrum, if you will. I look at the situation from two different perspectives, two different angles. My father told me the story of Field Marshal von Blücher, and one of our friends, in a letter he wrote to me, an American living in Germany, reminded me of this story. This story seems important to me as my father's side of the family hails from the same place in East Germany where Field Marshal Gebhard Leberecht von Blücher was born, whereas my mother's side of the family is of French descent. Now, von Blücher was an excellent soldier and at the same time famous for being a very fair, honest, and absolutely reliable man, loved by his own soldiers and the Prussians as a whole, and highly respected even by the enemy. During the Napoleonic Wars, he, in January of 1815, when he and his troops crossed the River Rhine, addressed the French people and told them that he would not fight the French people, but only those who wanted to continue to fight the murderous wars of the crazily ambitious and self-centered, but nevertheless also excellent soldier, Napoleon, whose wars had already cost the lives of more than 600,000 French people. 5 months later, his British friend, Field Marshal and General Wellington, who with his troops had been fighting hard for 8 hours straight to keep Napoleon's forces at bay and from overrunning their positions, felt that defeat was close. So he said, "Night or the Prussians with von Blücher must come." It was 9 p.m., and night didn't fall, but von Blücher and his Prussians came to his aid, and the battle and the war was won there at Waterloo. You know, even though I believe that all wars are evil crimes, I like that image. It reminds me of us, of all of us, Germans, French, British, Italians, simply all of us on this side of the fence being the cavalry. Because we need no one else. We are the cavalry. And just to make this clear, I do not believe that Napoleon was a monster. It was just time to stop him from getting more people killed. Now, a little more than 200 years later, we do have to deal with monsters. But we cannot be consumed by their war. As always, there is another perspective from which we can look at what's going on, especially if we want to see beyond the war. We're now, without a doubt, winning against the monsters. And that is why I want to read to you from a message I got from the Waitaha people and that I also read to Inca. I am doing this for two reasons. The first one is that nothing has ever moved either me or Inca the way this message did. And the second I'll explain at the end of that message, which I think I was meant to relay to you. The Waitaha people were there in New Zealand long before the Maori came and pretty much killed them, almost all of them. This is the message. The land of Waitingi-Kirau, that's New Zealand, bears a heavy burden, a burden of a corrupted glory, a burden of deep grief, a burden which wants to be recognized and healed. Sadly enough, the people carry the same burden. They have forgotten where they belong to. Once we lived in these lands in prosperity and peace. The days are long gone. When the warrior canoes came onto the shores, the sad story unfolded. We have handed it down to the times when our traditions could be recorded in writing and given to the world. We are Waitaha. We are the water carriers. We are eternally bound in spirit to Yo, the Supreme. We follow the gentle ways of Rongo Maroa Rea, the keeper of peace. Our wings are softly touching the ones who stand tall like trees in the storm. We thank you for your courage and sincere endeavor to connect and collaborate with our Mokopuna, which is their heirs, those who came after them. We deeply appreciate all your work of revealing the true backgrounds of a crisis which swept over humanity as the floods did in Atlantis. In doing so, you exposed yourself to the dark forces which want to keep mankind bound in ignorance and denial. You are graced with exceptional strength and mana, which is heart or courage, to stand up against the warriors of darkness who sail under the protection of Dhammatanenga, which is the god of war. Know that we are watching over you and stand by your side in this time of confusion and adversity. That's the end of that little message. So here's reason number 2 I'm telling you this. We have every reason to be optimistic and win this war, which we are, because we're protected by the Waitaha, but also by the Indians of North America on whose land our ranch was on, and by the Aborigines of Australia, my friend Max's Aborigines. Because these people are much more connected with nature, which is, as far as I'm concerned, the only true reality. They're much more connected than most of us are with nature. And through them, we are also connected, I believe, not just with nature, but also with each other. And because of this, we are about to step into, I believe, a very bright and very peaceful, real reality, a brand new future. And that is worth everything. Now, as I'm not exactly a man of grave pathos, let alone a preacher, I'll end this statement by solving the almost ridiculous riddles I gave to you a little more than a week ago. The man who is fighting the fight of his life and has taken on both the poisonous pharmaceutical and the equally poisonous food industry to teach all of us how to live a healthy life is, of course, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The man who will, I believe, be greatly relieved that he has no reason to feel bad about anything when he finds out who he really is, of course, Prince Harry. The question if a former U.S. president was hooked up to the same 12-volt car battery every morning that powered his auto pen, thus far has not been answered reliably. The woman who believes that she once was the German Secretary of State and also a famous international lawyer and then became President of the United Nations General Assembly, despite the fact that she was responsible for having me kidnapped in Mexico, is Annalena Baerbock. And all of this will lead to many, many questions that neither she nor the UN will be able to answer. William Shatner is, of course, Denny Crane in the fantastic TV show Boston Legal of the early 2000s. I believe it ran from 2004 until 2007 or so. Bill Shatner played Captain James T. Kirk in the cult TV show Star Trek of the late 60s. Inca and I loved to watch The Wire, Justified with Timothy Olyphant, and, of course, Yellowstone with Kevin Costner. But Boston Legal is special and teaches you everything law school won't. Bill Shatner is incredibly funny as Denny Crane. The fantastic writers of the show invented both fascinating and very intelligent stories, but most importantly, this is the most warm-hearted, humanely written TV show you can imagine. See you very, very soon, my friends.